It's August 6th, 2020. This is Roqe. Well, there are no shortage of finding success against all odds stories in the Iranian diaspora, and those stories need to be told. For example, imagine the discipline, fortitude, and focus it takes to be a world-class medal-winning athlete. Then imagine you're doing so as a woman in a traditional male-dominated sport. Then imagine that your family escaped from Iran and brought you to the West as a little kid with nothing in their pockets but the hopes of making a life. Karate champion and now Canadian national team coach, Nassim Varasteh is in the Roqe Studio today. This is Conversations from, to, and about the Iranian diaspora. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. This is Roqe. Welcome. Bienvenue to episode number 33 of Roqe. Dastetun dard nakone.
Why?
Are you laughing
Can
at
I not say that to the audience, Shaya? Can I not speak to the audience without you interrupting me, please?
It's your lahja he's laughing at.
It's Thursday. So as you can hear, some of the dream team is here in the studio. Hello, the fabulous Kia.
Hello, Jian. How are you? I can't help but giggle sometimes. You bring it out in me.
You certainly can't. Captain Reza, greetings to you.
Thank you very much. Greetings to you too, Mr.
And
Ghomeshi.
hello, groovy Shaya June.
Hello, سرتون درد نکنه.
سلام در میکنه دیگه.
Do you know this is a response for, I mean, if somebody say to you, دست درد نکنه, you have to say سرت درد نکنه.
You know what I like about you, Shaya?
Yes.
Everything's a teaching moment. It's like with my dog Oogie, you know, when he's going to be, it's time for food. I have to teach him. He's still learning. He's a puppy. So, and with you, I can't, anything I say, it's a good opportunity for you to teach me.
But you know what's interesting about
What?
Shaya? He's either teaching or learning. So he's either being taught or
That's
teaching.
right. But there seems like there's
that.
a little bit of, I don't want to say it's patronizing, but there's a little extra gusto sometimes to his teaching.
He feels good. Well, look at me and you. How good is our farce? He's probably feeling really good about himself.
It does. He feels empowered. Yeah. So we'll play this out. Hey Shaya, dastetun dard nakone.
سرتون درد نکنه.
And then what do I say? Merci. Salam dar mikone.
I'm sure you could take it further. You could always
All
keep
right.
going with that.
By the way, Keon, is it still your birthday?
It was my birthday last week.
I know, but I
Jian.
keep seeing you.
Thank you.
You keep posting pictures of you on birthday trips.
I'm just enjoing my summer at
Happy-
this point.
Happy birthday
Thank
to you.
you.
I don't know if we said it last week.
Thanks for the week late
Keon
birthday
June.
wish. It was July 20th, in case you were
By
wondering.
the way, I don't think I told you guys this. After the, I was kind of saving it. After the Babak Amini interview on Monday, it was a great show, a great interview. It felt really good. I was feeling pretty great about myself, and I go home, and I don't get home till late. We had taped the interview, and we had to post it and everything. I had these ideas. I'm going to get home, going to make myself a pasta dinner, have a chill night. I get home pretty late in the evening. I drive up to my house. I start to see debris and cables and things, and half of a tree next to my house because there was a storm.
Oh.
Why are you laughing at
No,
this?
I'm waiting for the
it's a tragic
punchline.
story.
I know, you're smiling.
So,
So I'm like, it must be a funny one.
I'm just so happy to be here. Happy to be anywhere at this point. The tree, a tree fell and took down the cables, like the power cables and all that. So I had no cable or internet or power. And so I just sat in my house in the dark with my dog as a celebration of the Babak Hamini interview.
Oh Oh my God!
Yeah, and with the pouring rain on hold with 311, which is the city, you know, to try and get that's my.
It's quite the celebration.
Little Iggy must have been traumatized.
Oogie was wondering what's going on. He was definitely wondering what's going on.
It's your fault.
He was definitely confused. We have much to get to today. We have lots of interesting letters of the week. We will get to those, right, Keon?
Indeed.
The fabulous Keon. So you will be back, Reza, Shaya. Stick around and let me get to our featured guest who is walking into studio. Anyone who ever suggested in some antiquated and chauvinist way that women are not tough enough for martial arts has probably not witnessed the sporting career of our guest today. Nassim Varasteh is an Iranian-Canadian athlete who has carved out the moniker of Karate Queen for herself in what has been a traditionally male-dominated sport. She is the most accomplished Canadian karateka in the history of the sport and one of the most respected competition karate coaches in the world. With 2 silver medals in the World Championships and 5 Pan American titles under her belt, she is a second Dan karate legend who has had an extensively thriving career as a competitor. She also happens to be the daughter of Dr. Farhad Varasteh, the man who was the pioneering founder of karate in Iran, a sport that has become very popular among Iranians. Nassim is a 12-time national champion for Canada, who is also a highly successful sport club owner and instructor and has worked alongside Karate Canada's national teams. She has been the recipient of numerous awards throughout the years, including the Karate Ontario Sportsmanship Award, 3 consecutive years as Karate Ontario Female Athlete of the Year, the National Karate Association Sportsmanship Award, the elected Canadian Olympic Committee Athlete Representative for Karate, and the women's team captain for the national team. She was also one of 2 athlete role models in the Youth Olympic Games in Buenos Aires in 2018. Nassim is a mother of 2 who was born in Iran, moved to Canada when she was 6 years old. She is currently the national team head coach for Karate Canada and the only female head coach of a combat sport in Canada. And right now, Nassim Varasteh joins me in the Roqe Studio. Hello.
Hello.
Very nice to have you here.
It's really a pleasure to be here.
It's exhausting reading your accomplishments.
You did really well.
there's too really many, and I left a lot of them aside. I didn't go through all the awards.
Well, you pretty much got the main ones.
I got the gist of it. Yeah. You know, I what I really appreciate about you, despite the fact that you were actually born in Iran, is that I think your Farsi is actually worse than mine. It's yani اینقدر که من بد هستم تو اصلا بدتر هستی, I think.
You should have seen how bad I was a few years ago. Like, I think you would have cried for me. So.
And I think my latcha is better than yours. That's what I'm running with anyway.
Sure.
Listen, this COVID time has undoubtedly been a tough time for you. And I can imagine business-wise as a gym owner, but also the national team can't be competing around the world or engaging in the kind of practices even that you were doing beforehand. I hear gyms are reopening. Are you back to teaching? Is the national team back in the swing of it now?
So, I mean, in terms of my own business, it was obviously tough, just like it's been difficult for all the businesses and most business owners. We closed in March. I actually closed the school down before the government mandated us to do so, just because we had so many families coming back from Iran after the spring break. I just didn't want to have anybody getting sick at our school. And then a week after we closed, the government mandated all the gyms and martial arts and everybody to close down. Was
it scary for you when things shut down?
It wasn't scary. I mean, it was just like, you need to understand that this is the best for everybody. So, I mean, it was not convenient by any means, but I mean, it was what needed to be done. So
because of Corona, you're not flying around as much and you're not out of town as much, so you could come into the studio and do this interview, which is great for us. But I've heard you say that you've often avoided doing interviews, that you're kind of shy when it comes to doing interviews, which really surprised me. I'm sure I'm typecasting you here, but watching you do karate and knowing the kind of career that you've had that certainly takes a lot of stamina and confidence and perseverance and self-awareness, it surprised me that you were shy about interviews.
learned to come out of my shell in these last couple of years. I have this discussion with my husband all the time. He's like, how come you don't take these opportunities on? How come when you're asked you decline? And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it just doesn't suit my character, but I feel more and more that people want to know my story. And I'm slowly opening up to it. So
what was it about? Why would you be shy about it?
Really? I don't know. I've always been an introvert. I've always been a very private person. I've always been a very quiet person. I've never boasted about my accomplishments. When I was in high school and in university, it's like I could have been achieving everything that I was. I was national champion, and nobody even knew about it. You know?
Really? I was going to get to that.
Yeah.
I was wondering if while you were at York, people know that you're this karate champion.
Well, it got out, but it didn't get out through me. It always got out through my friends, or somebody said something, or, you know, my friends were always very proud of me. So they would always end up introducing me as so-and-so, and I would be like hitting them in the side. I'd be like, stop it.
Have there been situations where you, I mean, not now, where, you know, you'd be in your 20s with your friends at a bar and your friends would go, she's actually a karate champion. And then people would come over and clearly want to talk to you. How would you deal with that as an introvert?
I mean, it was just so embarrassing. I would just like turn every shade of red and just like cover my face. And eventually, I mean, people ask and they're interested, and you have to engage. You have to talk about it.
Do you think people find it alluring?
I think people are always curious when you're a unique character, somebody who is not typical. So, of course, I think there's definitely some sort of allure to it.
I want to get into your story that I'm grateful that we get to do an interview to hear about. But let me start with karate. There's something mystical, kind of romantic notion around traditional martial arts and combat sports, you know, that there are important values imbued in it, like discipline and focus and respect and honor, that you would somehow take those values and apply them in your life if you are practicing regularly. Is that a bit of a myth, or is that actually true?
I think for me, it is very true, because it's something that my father was he was always very insistent on that, and he always pushed that in the class with all of his students. So it's something that I believe that I practice, and I hope I do, and I hope that I reflect that. But, you know, in sport, it's different. I mean, karate's only become a sport in the last, let's say, 50 years. So I find that more as we have become part of the sport and Olympic movement, there's this growing disconnection between the martial arts spirit and between the sport.
A disconnect that you lament?
That I don't necessarily like, but I think it's just a natural byproduct.
But something like respect and honor, I mean, how does that transfer from, you said it's something that has occurred in your life, that you've taken that outside of your training and you're competing, and how does it manifest itself?
I think in our daily interactions with everybody, you know, and just how you view the world, how you view others, regardless of their skin tone, of their background, of their career, of whatever you do. It's how you treat others. It's how you view yourself. And
you teach that while you're teaching karate?
Absolutely we do. I mean, it's how we behave with the students. It's how we ask them to treat each other during class. And, you know, the students have to bow to the instructors have to bow to the students have to bow to each other. And there's this etiquette that is strictly enforced in the class. And, you know, when the kids are in it, or the students are in it long enough, and it creates a very, very nice balance and harmony in the class, regardless of the fact that if we're sparring, or if, you know, sometimes things can get a bit competitive, but at the same time, you always bow at the end.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it, that, I mean, I know this is probably a naive thing to say. People who are very involved in martial arts will probably hate me for saying this, but it is, on the face of it, it's fighting. I mean, it's sparring. And for that sport, from that to emerge respect and honor, as opposed to hockey or basketball or something, is interesting.
sparring is just one small part of the picture. And I think it's the part that is most interesting for people outside of the martial art, is they focus on the combat and on the act of combat. But in reality, it represents a very small part of your actual practice of martial arts. So
tell me about focus. Because I know you've said in one of the very few interviews you have done, you said when you're competing, it's all about focus. So what are you focusing on when you're competing?
Well, it depends. So when you're actually on the floor competing, it's an accumulation of time. So it's how we wake up in the morning. It's what we think about. It's how we talk to ourselves in our mind. It's that dialogue that I have with myself. But how do I make this very simple? How do you focus? Are we talking about the day of competition specifically, or for me as a coach, how do I define it, or for me as an athlete, how I define it?
Those are great questions. I'll tell you what's in my mind. In music, oftentimes, not classical music necessarily, but say contemporary music, you want the musician to practice as much as possible. But when they get on stage, you don't want them to be thinking about being technical. You want them to just play, man.
Absolutely.
So I'm wondering if it's something like that. If there's some kind of focus on, but I want to know what it is when it comes to karate. I mean, are you literally thinking, I've got to move my hand like this and my leg like this? Or by the time you're out there, are you just doing it, what comes naturally somehow, and focusing on the game, kind of?
I would say it's exactly as you described it. It's allowing yourself. For me, it was always about just focusing on staying relaxed and focusing on my breathing. Because really, all of the work is done. You have been in training for months. You have been in training camps for months. You have done all of the work. You have done all the practice. So now you just need to relax yourself and be present. Allow yourself to be present and to commit yourself to that match, regardless of the outcome. So this is what I had to focus on, was not to focus on the results, but focus on the process that would allow me to be present and ready when I step onto the mat.
Are you a really disciplined person?
I was a very disciplined person.
You are not anymore?
I am. But I mean, as a competitor, I was
But are you in life? Are you regimented? Is it, kids, we're going shopping now, and then at this time we're going to do this, and then I've got to get back to the gym? And
I would say so.
You are like that, aren't you?
I would say so.
You can't take the girl out of the super athlete, right?
I never actually thought of it that, but yeah, I mean, I would say that, but I am more flexible, especially now that I have kids, and I don't want to make them neurotic or anything like that. So I try to have a good balance.
But you're not messy. Everything's in its place, I bet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say that, yes.
So, you mix the Iranian with the superstar athlete, and the OCD is through the roof, I think.
Sadly, yes.
I want to get into your story, Nassim. Let me start with a quote, okay? Excellence is not an act, but a habit.
Aristotle.
What can you tell me about that quote? Who taught you that quote?
My father taught me that quote.
Tell us about your dad.
Wow. So many people would say that I've actually inherited quite a bit from my father in terms of like how we are. He was a very kind man. He was funny as hell. Like I always got a kick out of his humor. It was very witty. He was very honest. It was one of his strengths, and probably one of his weaknesses was that he was always honest. If he didn't like you, you knew that he didn't like you, He was a very good teacher. He knew how to approach teaching differently depending on the student.
I should note, I did in the intro, but that he's a legend for bringing karate to Iran, right?
Yes.
So where did he get that from?
So that's another story. So he was in boarding school in England as a small boy, and he decided one day to pick on this Japanese boy, and he ended up getting beat up by this small little Japanese kid. And he was like, what was that? I've never seen anybody do that. And the kid was like, oh, I do karate. And it wasn't like something that was widely practiced. at the time, and he became interested, and he took up karate, and my grandfather was sending him to Japan to learn karate, so he actually used to travel to Japan.
Wow.
To learn this martial art that he'd become so fascinated with, and he was learning karate as he was doing his studies in Europe, in Geneva.
And so by the time you're born, he's a legend in karate.
Yeah, and he was working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs at the time. Karate was not something that he ever planned on making his career. It just simply happened because he brought this new martial art, this new thing to a country where everybody just very quickly just became fascinated.
It sort of follows somebody who is the progeny, somebody who's the kid of someone who's been so successful in one particular area. Reshteh, there's this expectation. Well, of course, but is that true? Were you destined to be a karate kid?
I don't know. I mean, like, had I been born in a different family, I'm not sure I would have gone this path necessarily. I think I was naturally inclined to be competitive and to pursue a sport. Absolutely. I think I was always rough and tumble when I was a little girl. I was like, I don't know, tackling kids in the soccer field, and just like, it was like, I didn't know soccer without tackling. Like, what do you mean you can't tackle in soccer?
Do you think he wanted you to go into karate?
This is I mean, I have two older sisters who we were free to pursue it. Like, I want to say that. Like, he encouraged us to stay in it just to learn self-defense and to be active.
But he wasn't pushing it on you.
He didn't push it on them as much, but I feel like he pushed it on me a little bit more, just because I feel like he saw my potential and he saw that maybe there was something there, so that he recognized the spark in me. So he definitely nurtured it.
And when was the moment when you knew that this is something that had engulfed you, that you had such a passion for?
I actually hated it when I started it.
You did?
So yeah, I started when I was 6. I hated it all the way until I was 12. And yeah, and then when I was 12 or 13, I had my first competition, and I went and I just smoked everyone. And then I was like, oh, I kind of like this. And then that's when it all started for me.
Really?
Yeah.
So, wow. So you spent a few years not being so happy about being in karate.
Yeah. I mean,
That's incredible, because, the traditional story, Pele or Gretzky or something, it's like, well, I as soon as I was on the ice, I knew that was my dream forever, And so to hear someone who's ascended to the heights that you have in a sport say, actually, I wasn't that hot on it for the first few years, is really interesting.
Yeah, I think, number one, my father, having been my coach, he was always tougher on me than he was on all the other kids in class. And he always had very high expectations of me. Like, if I didn't work hard enough, I definitely heard about it the drive home. And I think it was that feeling that he was harder on me, that I may not have liked it as much. He always made me spar with like some of the stronger boys and stuff like that, and I would get hurt sometimes. So, but when I saw that, when I went to my first competition, and I blew everybody. Yeah, I cleaned up, and I had a lot of fun doing it, and I was just kind of like, you know what, I could do a little more of this. So
I want to get into your competitive streak, but first, you've said that, I mean, he wanted you to be number one.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's great. Come on, you can do it. But it's also a little worrisome. That's a lot to put on a kid, especially when you know that your dad is someone who people have looked up to in this sport. How do you feel about the fact that he wanted you to be number one?
I think it was good for me. I think it allowed me to set the standards very high. But I think it's very different than what we're doing now as coaches with kids. We just encourage them to go have fun and don't worry about everything and just do it. And I think, that's something that we brought back from our Iranian culture, is that we have that in our culture. We allow ourselves as parents to verbalize our very clear expectations to our kids and say, you know what, if you're going to do something, if you're going to do it, go and be great at it. So,
but see, my dad was like that with me too, and if it's such a great thing, then why wouldn't we want to do it? Why wouldn't you be practicing that with your younger students or with your kids? Yeah, I mean, in other words, you know that there's something about it that can be troublesome.
I don't think it's something you can say to just anybody. I think you need to recognize the talent, number one. You need to recognize that this individual has the willingness to attempt to reach these heights. So it's not just some you cannot mindlessly throw your expectations out. You definitely need to put some thought into it. But when you know that you have a pupil who is determined, who has the work ethic, and who has the talent, I think when you say that, you can be number one, it's actually very empowering.
Here's the problem. And I think this is an Iranian thing. And let me preface it with the disclaimer that my dad was the best ever. I loved, he really was. But the problem is when nothing's ever good enough, right? Mm-hmm. So anytime I would, Dad, I got an A+, or, I won this award. That is great, but please work harder. I mean, it became such a joke. I used to say it on my show, and people would know that was my dad's mantra, and so could your dad be happy if you won? Or was it, okay, kid, but you got to work harder. It's got to be better.
This is where I feel like he succeeded, was that whether I won or whether I had a bad competition, he always gave me that reassurance and that love. And I think it wasn't just plain expectations. And then, if I got second, he was extremely happy for me. And he was always very loving. So I think that's where we were able to strike that balance.
There's another element here, obviously, which is that you weren't just following the footsteps of your legendary founder of karate in Iran, your dad. You're female in a male-dominated sport. Tell me how much a drive for equality and female representation in karate has been important to you.
My father was a very open-minded man. I mean, since I was a kid, he would always tell me there's no difference between what you could achieve as a woman than what any other man would be able to achieve. And this is something that I always believed as a child. I always believed it. Like, he would take me out to buy running shoes, and we'd end up in the men's section, and I'd be like, well, Daddy, these are boys' shoes. It's like, there's no difference between boy and girl shoes. Like, I never felt limited because I was a girl. I never saw it as a type of handicap.
Did you face obstacles as being female as you were coming up in Canada in karate?
Absolutely. I mean, like, I felt like I always got recognition, but I always felt like if I had been a male achieving what I had, I definitely would have gotten more recognition for my accomplishments. But beyond that, I don't think that as a competitor, I don't believe it was as much of an obstacle as much as it is in my coaching career.
Well, I was getting to that. I mean, you are the only female head coach of any combat sport in Canada. Do you think about being a role model for girls? I mean, we had Farinaz Alari on one of our early shows, actually, and she's the gold medalist kickboxer, mm-hmm. Iranian, now Canadian. Interesting, similar trajectory, except, of course, she grew up in Iran, but now she's practicing in Canada and with the Canadian team. And she said a big part of this for her, a big part of the spirit of what she wants to do at this point is by being who she is, set an example for girls, especially girls in Iran, to know that they can do this.
Absolutely. I mean, it was never I can say this, it was never my main driver. Right. But I mean, it's definitely something that especially now that I have a daughter, I have a lot of girls in my school who are working with me. And I think it's important that they know that if they put their mind to something, and if they really commit themselves to something, they can achieve it regardless of their gender, regardless of anything. But I mean, for me, all of my goals, I was very self-driven. And I think that now that I'm in the position that I am, that I'm able to uplift the others and really show them that, we can all do it.
When you say, if I had been a man, all the awards I'd won, or I would have gotten more recognition, you think that people would just take you more seriously somehow?
I feel like back home in Iran, yes, even more so. But in Canada, I mean, I've been given plenty of recognition. I've obviously received a good position in my career.
Yes.
But I feel like, you know, with the Iranian mentality, especially back home, it's very different. You know, I mean, if you're a woman and you've accomplished something, it's never looked upon the same as if it was a man. For example,
does that ever happen overtly? Have you actually heard from people going, what are you doing with this karate stuff or something like that?
Not to my face, no.
They would never say to your face.
No.
Because you could beat them up.
I don't know. Maybe they're polite. I don't know.
Right. But you feel it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just like it's always been there.
You know, I want to ask you about being Iranian, because you left at a very early age with your family, but you're so Iranian in so many ways. You know, when you were on that TV program and they were going through your house, I was like, that's an Iranian's house. You know,
yeah.
It's and did you self-identify as Iranian growing up in Canada? Did you ever feel like an outsider the way I certainly did when we were growing up, or was it generally comfortable for you?
I left when I was 3 months old.
Yes.
My Farsi was terrible always growing up, but you know, it's like when you're living with your family, when I was always with my father, it's the values that were handed down to me. All of my friends were Iranian growing up for the most part. Not all, but I would say majority of them. Of course, it's been a big part of my life and who I am. And I think it's been quite defining, actually. Like in terms of, I feel like it's given me strength.
Oh, how's it given you strength to be Iranian?
You know, I think as a people, we're very proud, and we're quite ambitious, and we're not afraid to verbalize those expectations to our children. And I think that was always important for me growing up, was the fact that my father always said to me, like, I expect you to be the best. And it was because he believed that I could. But I think maybe if we were from a different culture or whatever, it would have been different. I think it was a cultural expectation, maybe, or maybe it was just the fact that he was able to verbalize it. But all of this being said, I mean, I stopped training with my dad at 18 because the pressure was just too much. And I turned around and I told him, like, I would rather have you as my father than as my coach. And he accepted, you know.
But something that's really nice to see is, despite the fact that you're a girl, I mean, after you leave Iran at 3 months old, you go to France first, right, for a few years, and then Canada. Is that the? Yeah.
So we escaped through the mountains. We went to Turkey, and then from there we went to Paris.
Oh, you guys escaped.
Yeah, we escaped
because your dad was.
He
needed
was.
To.
Yeah, because he was working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs under the Shah's regime, so he was affiliated with the Shah at the time. So that was enough to get him imprisoned for several months. And then after that,
Before you were born? Or as you were born?
This is like pretty much as I was born, because I was only 3 months old when we left, and we ended up having to flee through the mountains, and we left with nothing except for the clothes on our backs, my father and 4 children and a wife. So yeah, so I mean, like, you know, having experienced, like, I don't remember that experience, but I mean, having known that this was your past, that your father had everything, he was educated, he had his world, and then we pretty much left and we started with nothing. You know, you feel when you're growing up that I have to do something, and if I'm going to do something, I'm going to absolutely apply myself.
I was going to say, despite the fact that you've grown up in Canada, you are really embraced by the Iranian community. I mean, Iranians are proud of you, those that know, you know, of you and your story. And I understand a lot of the students that you have are Iranian too, right? I mean, they clearly, like, they're like, we get to work with Nassim. How does that feel?
I think it's great. You know, the Persian kids, like, who have grown up here, even, like, I have friends who I grew up with at the karate school, and we're still friends after 30 something years. You know, I guess, Canadian mentality. We all grew up here, and now the generation of students that I work with, yeah, they have Persian parents, but they're all Canadian children. But it's still really nice to have that community over there, and that, you know, we continue to give back to the community, and I really enjoy that.
You went to York University for psychology.
I did, yeah.
So is that to say that you, given that your dad was the karate guy and that you were already competing at, that you escaped the Iranian parental pressure of doctor or engineer, and you were able to at least get the psychology subject, or was that not even a conversation in your family?
You know, my dad, I mean, like I said, he was like a very like Iranian man, but he was educated in Europe. I mean, he wasn't your typical Persian guy. He was extremely open-minded. He was very well-spoken. He never had that expectation that you have to go and become a doctor and you have to marry a doctor and you have to do all this stuff. It was always do one thing and be good at it. It was always that. Just follow your passion, but if you're going to go a certain direction, you should excel and succeed in that. And that was always something that I practiced.
So was psychology something that was particularly interesting to you?
I actually switched over from a business major to psychology. I took a psychology courses, just a subject elective, and then I was like, wow, I like this. This is fun. I actually enjoy reading the material, so I switched over.
And again, you're on the national team at that point, right? You're competing and going to university for psychology. By day, by night, she's a karate champion.
Those years at York, I was teaching at a private school. I had an after-school karate program, and that's how I was pretty much making my own pocket money. I was an athlete on the national team, and I was teaching at my dad's school 7 days a week. I don't know how I did it. Like, those years just went by, and it's all quite vague to me. You know, my father started to become ill, and he had less energy to teach, and I needed to take on more classes over there. So I had to do what I had to do, and it was hard. Those years at York, it was just like, it was really difficult.
But this is kind of a theme with you, right? You're I mean, even now, you're a mother of two. You run a gym. You're the national team coach. You're active on social media. Like, you're not a retiring personality, right?
I don't know. I think I just like to create havoc for myself. No, I mean, it's funny.
What is that all about for you? What is it with that doing so many things?
I mean, I guess I've never known a different way of life. I've always been a multitasker. I've always liked to be busy. I've always liked to fill the hours of my day, and I've always liked to do the most that I can with my time, to use my time to do the most that I can with, and I can honestly say the most difficult time in my life was when my children were still in diapers and I had to stay home and just feed them and change their diapers. And I can honestly say that it was mentally and emotionally one of the most challenging times of my life. Because I felt confined, and I felt like I needed to be doing so much more, and I was so driven. Like, I felt like, not to take anything away from how hard it is to child rear. Absolutely not. Yeah. No, it was so difficult. It was so difficult, and it was honestly one of the most challenging times of my life. Really was, like, mentally, physically, and emotionally, it was exhausting. But at the same time, it's not being exhausted that I have a problem with. Like, I can travel, I was competing, I was studying, I was working. It was just feeling confined, yeah.
You've never, I mean, there's probably been no point in your life where you had to be at home working on a project, in this case, 2 small kids, right?
Yeah, and I had them back to back. My children are a year and a day apart.
So should I assume that there's no third kid forthcoming?
No. No. I mean, the kids are, my daughter's 10 and my son is 9, and it's just, it wouldn't make sense to, I mean, when people ask me if I want to have more kids, I'm like, why? Does the world need any more people? Number one. And I would rather do my best with 2 kids and try to raise 2 good human beings rather than just have more children and have less time for them.
More people, but then you got a bigger team to work at the dojo and
that's
get
it.
them to do things.
My cleaning staff and my teaching.
That's right. That was a reason people had a lot of kids in the past, right? They get them to work the fields, do things. I said I want to come back to you being competitive. How important are the awards that you've received to you? I mean, I know the one thing that has eluded you through no fault of your own, because it wasn't an Olympic sport until recently, is an Olympic medal. Is it really important to you, or can you be satisfied with being as successful as you've been?
It was never important to me, because if it was, I think I would have quit a long time ago. Like I would not have been driven as an athlete if one of my priorities was to be recognized as an athlete. Number one, at the time, we weren't an Olympic sport, so the government funding was a lot less. I would say the first few years of my years as an athlete on the national team, I was self-funded. Like, we had to pay for ourselves to travel to represent Canada. Like, as crazy as it sounds, but this is true.
You have to run around looking for sponsors.
Absolutely. But I mean, this is not just true for our sport, but true for almost all of the national sports.
Right.
And then when I achieved my first, I think it was my silver gold medal at the Pan Ams, and I became carded. And that's when the government starts to give you money, like basically having a salary. And they were also paying for my university tuition. And that was a huge break for me. So after, I would say, my first few years on the national team, after that I became carded, and I was carded for about 6 years.
What does carded mean?
Carded means...
Other than checking your age when you're going to buy alcohol? Isn't that what getting carded means?
No.
Right.
So when you're an athlete on the Canadian national team and you achieve a certain performance, for example, a medal at the World Championships or top 8 at the World Championships, or even a medal at a continental event, it's a pretty big achievement, and it's difficult to achieve. So the national team program, along with the government, they basically start to give you a salary monthly, and they pay for your university or college tuition.
Competitive sport is obviously something that you can't do forever. It's a young person's game to a certain extent, but 27 seems like a young age to retire.
Yeah.
Why did you call it quits at 27?
I was burnt out. I mean, I was coaching myself most of the time. I mean, like I said earlier, I stopped training under my dad. I mean, formerly my father was always my coach. We had the coach of the national team, but because we weren't centralized, we were all the coach was out in another province, and I saw him maybe once or twice a year. So I was making my own training plans. I would drive to Montreal by myself just to be able to have training partners. Wow. I had nobody to work with here. So because
they weren't good enough?
I mean, for example, I needed people my weight. I had guys at the dojo I could have trained with, but they were like 6 foot something and like, I don't know, close to 200 pounds. So it's very different. I mean, for me as a competitor, tactically, it wasn't very helpful. In terms of my distancing, it wasn't very helpful. And of course, like, a guy that big can't go all out on you. So I mean, it just wasn't what I needed as an athlete. So I would drive out. It's
a constant hustle. It sounds like a constant hustle.
It was. So I mean, like, I feel like I was exhausted. Even after my first silver at the World Championships, I didn't want to continue after that. I was happy. I was like, you know what? I achieved the medal at the World Championships, and I'm happy with it. And then I had the pressure from everybody around me in the National Federation, and they were like, you can't stop now. You have to keep going. And I was on a streak. Like, I was medaling at almost every international event that I went to. I was very consistent. So I had some pressure to stay on, and I went on to the next World Championships, which was 2 years after that, and I medaled again, and then I was like, okay, now I'm done. And plus I had a torn ligament in my knee when I went to that last competition, so I was training with a lot of pain, and I was getting I was getting some treatment and injections in my knee just to get me through training because it was too close to the World Championship, so I couldn't get surgery.
Have you ever regretted it? I mean, you're still not very old. You could presumably jump back in, right?
No, not at all.
No?
I was ready to start the next chapter of my life. But
what does it mean to you to be the Canadian national team coach?
I mean, it's a great honor. I don't know. It's just been a really great experience, you know, and I'm so happy that my daughter can see that I'm in this position, and I know that she's really proud of me, and that makes me happy.
What do you learn by being a coach rather than being the player?
Wow, it's so much more difficult to be a coach. It's funny. I mean, sometimes when I'm at a World Championships and I'm just running everywhere, you know, you have to make sure everybody's healthy, everybody's weight is good, and everybody's weighed in, and everybody's registered, and everybody's where they should be, and everybody knows what time they're competing. And then sometimes you have to deal with like family and friends, and then you have to deal with some political stuff that's happening. Mm-hmm. There is just so much that you have to take on at a big event. And it was just so much easier as an athlete when you can just focus on yourself, you go in your bubble, and you just, you know, especially as a more seasoned athlete, where you understand the routine and you're not like worried and intimidated by the name of an event. Oh, it's an Olympic Games. Oh,
you've got one job to do.
Absolutely.
Right.
But as a coach, and as a coach, you have to take on everybody's pressure. You know, you have to take on everybody's stress. And it's a completely different experience, and it's exhausting. Like, I will come home from the World Championships and I just feel like I'm in pieces. I'm exhausted, you know.
You've mentioned weight a few times. You know, you have to make sure that people have a certain weight, and because that's important in competing. You're in weight classes, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a question I thought I was going to ask, but does it? Are you really disciplined about? I mean, if we come to your house for a mehmoni, do we get portions of qeimah?
Oh, God, no.
You're not allowed to have very much because you have to stay in your weight class.
No, absolutely not. I mean, even when I was an athlete and I was competing, I was always at my comfortable weight. I mean, there's some athletes on the national team who have to do like pretty big weight cuts going into competition, and it's exhausting, like especially in those last 24 hours when they cut their water and they're depleted.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's just like you just got to make sure that like everything is going well, because you know, when you travel and you're in Europe or you're in Asia, and all of a sudden, you know, jet lag, long flight, no food, no water. It's just like, I mean, we really have to be there to support the athletes.
Do you still eat rice and bread?
I love it. Of course.
So that's okay. We can still eat that.
Yeah, I love bread and rice. Of course.
I feel like that's the bane of my existence. I can't stop. You know, you can't take the burden. I can't stop eating I know that if I ate less rice and bread, I wouldn't have to. I'd just be naturally lean. I wouldn't have to go to the gym all the time.
Yeah, but then you would take away one of life's many pleasures.
100%.
And that's, I mean, if you're a foodie, you're a foodie. So,
you know, I was thinking about your trajectory and your father and your role model and your inspiration that he was, and you lost your dad in March 2015. It was just I know what that could be like because I lost my dad 5 months earlier. Tell me about how losing him affected you.
Oh, that's a tough one, because it affected me in so many ways. But I would say one thing that came out of that was I think I became uncompromising in some ways. I wanted to live life in a way that made me happy. There was one moment when I was at the hospital with my father, and it was like in one of his last days, and I asked him if he had any regrets. And he said many. And it was like, you know, I was at the hospital with my dad, and he wasn't, and we often spoke. I mean, he and I were very chatty with each other. We spoke of politics, we spoke of everything. And then so I was there with him, and he was there and I was there, and he wasn't talking, but I could tell, like, he wasn't sleeping, but I could tell there was so much going on in his mind. And it was one thing that I wanted to know. I just wanted to know if he had regrets. And I didn't ask him what they were. It didn't matter. And he said many. And I decided at that moment that I want to live my life in such a way that I have none. So, I mean, when I lost him, that was just like, I just told myself that, you know, we had that conversation, and I just like, that's something that I really took away from it.
I've heard that you actually had an offer to teach in Iran.
Yeah, I had.
That took a lot out of you, didn't it? Talking about your dad like that.
No, I mean, it's funny because we had that conversation, and, you know, I had to go to a national team training camp. And I knew, you know, like at that time he was very ill, and I knew that if I go to this camp, I may not see him again.
Yeah.
And then I think that was one of the last days I saw him. I saw him maybe once after that.
What was he suffering from?
He had cancer. And he was very weak in those last days, and I went to camp. And I went to the training camp, and then they called me when I was at the training camp, and they said that your father's probably not going to be with us for much longer. You need to come to the hospital now. And I left the camp, and I was driving to the hospital, and I didn't make it in time. I was just a few minutes late. Anyway, so I mean, that last conversation that I had with him was important to me.
Yeah.
It was important. What was that last question you had? I feel like I kind of went back.
It's okay.
No,
it was important. No, I was asking about, I had heard that you had this opportunity this year or recently to actually teach in Iran, and that was something that had interested you, and I was sort of going to end with where you're going now with things.
Yeah, so I have been asked to, like, I would say for the last, 8 years or so, I've been asked to go and do seminars and to teach and to run clinics.
In Iran?
Yeah, because there's, thousands of girls practicing karate, so many more than there are here. It's such a big sport. It's such a big sport in Iran.
So is there a dress code, or what are they allowed to do in Iran?
The girls have to wear the head coverings when they compete.
Sorry, are the head coverings a disadvantage in competition?
I would imagine it's uncomfortable.
Have you ever tried it?
No, I haven't tried it. But I mean, sometimes I see the girls having to sew it to their heads, just because sometimes in a clinch, or in the middle of a throw, all of a sudden they sew
the headscarf to their head.
Yeah, so they sew it to their hair. So they make a ponytail, and then you just run it through their. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's uncomfortable, I'm sure, but I mean, they don't have a choice. I was actually speaking with somebody earlier, and some of the other Muslim countries like Egypt and Morocco, it's optional. There are girls on the national team who wear it, and there's others who don't, and they're free to do so. And with the Iranians, it's completely different. But I've been asked to do seminars, to run clinics. It's been on the table for, I'd say, the last 8 years or so. But this past year, they actually asked me to go and coach their female national team. And we were in serious discussions. Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, it was something I was strongly considering, just because I feel like, what a great end to, I have been committed to the Canadian national team, but it would be such a nice way to honor my father's legacy and his life's work. If I was to go and finish my coaching career in coaching the Iranian national team, I think it would just wrap things up so perfectly. So we were in discussions, and then it's everything just happened with the killing of the Iranian general, and then the shooting down of the Ukrainian jet, and then COVID. So it just seems like everything just fell through the cracks.
But it's something you're open to, huh?
It was. I think the situation is very different now.
Meaning you would move to Iran?
I would have moved for the contract. I would have moved for those months. And I mean, when you know that you're away, of course it's difficult for me to be away from my family, from my children. But when you know that it's for a defined period of 6 months and you need to endure, it's you commit to something and you go. I mean, regardless of when you accept the circumstances, then you accept it.
How do you define success now, Nassim?
I mean, if you have accolades and achievements and you're not content and you're not happy, then you haven't achieved success. I think it's when you are at peace with yourself. It's when you are happy, when you're alone and nobody's watching. And I can honestly say that I am. I'm happy with the decisions I've made in my life, with my career path, with how I interact with others, with how I treat others, with how I view myself. So I think that's a big part of being successful, is, not just how the public perceives you and all the titles you can have under your belt. It's also how I feel when I'm just me, myself, and I. So
thank you for doing this today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
It wasn't too bad. You're doing an interview. You've been avoiding interviews all those years.
It's actually a lot of fun, and I think I think I could get used to it, and I'm feeling more comfortable to.
They're not all going to be this good. Let's face it.
Okay.
But really, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much.
That's Nassim Varasteh, karate champion and the current national team head coach for Karate Canada. She joined us here in the Roqe Studio.
زخم قدیمی بازه هنو میشه تازه هنو از تو روحو میسوزونه از بیرون یه رازه هنو زخم قدیمی بازه هنو میشه تازه هنو این کلمه ها مرهمن و این هنجره بهترین سازه هنو بگو همه بیان که تنها اومدم نداره زخم رو من سر با درد بار اومدم برادرم نداشتش معرفت تو مثل یوسف دربارت چه اومدم تنها اومدم تا هر جا اومدم هر جا قلب من یخ نمیزنه به این دنیا توی سرما اومدم برا مهم
We'll taste some brand new music from Irfan, our friend, and an album called Angize that came out this week, and that's a song called Zakhm Qadimi. That's featuring Jidal. Nice to have a new record from Irfan. Nassim Varasteh has left the studio. The fabulous Keon and our Roqe team is back in their place. Hi, Keon.
Hello, Jian. How's it going?
How about Nassim, huh?
She's a strong woman. I have to say, it's refreshing to see a woman that's the opposite of a Persian princess, that stereotype. And actually, I think I want to call my mom after this and yell at her for not putting me in karate.
You want to yell at your...
I think I do, yeah.
Listening to this interview about Nassim made you angry at your mother.
It actually, she reminded me a lot of myself. Even when she was talking about playing soccer, she would just go around tackling kids. That's what I did. They called me the bulldozer on the soccer field.
You've not done karate?
No, my mom was too much of a feminine. She was like, oh, don't ruin your looks. I don't want you to get scars playing soccer,
Wow.
She just...
and how did that work out?
I mean, I ended up playing rugby.
Rugby?
Well. I did.
Boy.
I have a lot of anger. I take it out in sport.
Well, sounds like... I don't think that karate's not necessarily the place for anger. It sounds like it's quite meditative in some ways.
Is it, though?
I don't know. That's what it was sold to me that way, physically and spiritually. So, Groovy Shaya, your impressions?
Yes. Actually, I didn't know Nassim before this interview, and thank you for introducing her to me. دستتون درد نکنه. Really, I
سرتون درد نکنه.
Beautifully done.
That's a callback to earlier in the show, by the way. Nothing to do with Nassim.
Nicely done.
No, really, I got impressed by her.
Yeah, I think carrying the weight of following your father in your father's footsteps, given that he was such a legend in the same sport, and achieving what she's achieved is magnificent. And she's a great personality. Reza, any comments? Captain Reza?
Thanks for rephrasing that. But same impression. I was quite impressed by her discipline and perseverance and just her passion for it. Was so interesting to me that she said when she started karate she wasn't passionate about it. She didn't find it interesting. She hated it, and then as she realized that she's really good at it, she became super passionate about this sport.
See, I will cop to something. I didn't want to say it to her, but when I was a kid, my dad my dad put me in judo for a while.
Judo.
and I just got beaten up and said that I don't want to go anymore. And so she persevered for 6 years
Yeah.
and then fell in love with it. I think I lasted less than 6 weeks.
Yeah. I have a very similar story. Yeah, my dad put me in karate. I got beaten up. I burnt down the locker room, and then that was it. My dad was like, "No more karate for you."
I,
Literally burnt down the locker
Yeah,
room.
with matches.
In Iran?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
Okay.
burnt down the guy's gym bag that beat me up, and then the whole thing.
How old
Oh
were
my
you?
God.
How old were you?
7.5.
He's like 5 years old.
no,
No,
seven
he's-
and a half.
he's seven.
Wow.
Yeah.
Reza, what was wrong with you?
Loved matches.
By the way, Keon, you've gone to the Arta Gallery
I have.
in the
yes.
distillery, the beautiful distillery district
gorgeous.
of Toronto. This show, these shows this week are brought to us by the Arta Gallery. It is a gallery that houses international and Canadian artists, as well as supporting a lot of Iranian artists or Iranians who are artists in the diaspora. They have a lot of events there. It's a fabulous space. If you are in Toronto or if you're coming at any point, head down and check out the Arta Gallery. And thanks to the Arta Gallery for all that you do for the community. The fabulous Keon is here. Captain Reza, Groovy Shaya. That can only mean one thing. Letters of the Week.
Okay, so this week on episode 32, we had an interview with the guitar virtuoso himself, Mr. Babak Amini. We had a few people write into us. We have a Negin Dusti. She wrote to us on YouTube saying, "Beautiful interview, Jian. Thank you. I think what makes Mr. Amini's music impressive, in addition to his rhythm, speed, accuracy, and dexterity, is his incredible ability to connect his inner self with the outer world. Babak's music reflects his sensitive soul, his creative mind, and his serene personality." Very beautifully
Wow.
written.
That's not the letter of the week?
No,
So
there's-
nicely written.
I know.
You got some doozies coming up.
I got
guess,
some
yeah.
good ones coming.
Thank you, Negin.
And we have Mina Mohazab on Facebook wrote, "That was amazing. Thank you, Jian, for a good choice. Now I know Babak Amini better and have so much respect for him. Bravo, man."
Nice. Thank you, Mina.
As well, we have Farzaneh Aghevli. Sure.
Shaya.
I'm like
probably
waiting for
Agha Vali.
Agha Vali.
No, it's not. It's VLI. I
Agh-
think it's
Aghevli.
Aghevli. Is that possible?
Let's go with that. So she wrote saying, "He is such a great artist and a wonderful person." He is indeed.
Thank you, Farzaneh.
As well, last week on episode 31, we had an interview with the pioneering human rights attorney, Banafshe Akhlaqi, which I am a huge fan of. I'm a new huge fan of this
You're a new recruit.
wonderful woman.
But
yeah,
some
that
people
I-
are not. Or not that they're not fans of her, but weren't happy with some of the
Yeah, it seems like it.
the issues we discussed last week.
I just like her for her strength and personality, just her human nature. She has such a sensitive, beautiful soul. So we have a Ali Reza Asghari on YouTube wrote, "It's not a racist quote when you say some of my brothers and sisters in the Middle East look like me, but others don't. The only variation in human genomes is 0.1%. What is the meaning of people of color? It is better to say we're all human and should have the same rights and responsibilities in our society. The stupid radical lefts and right divide people by their colors, genders, ethnicities, and religions."
Okay, Ali Reza, thank you for that.
And then moving on, we have a Patty Naz Taleghani from Vancouver. She wrote to us on Instagram saying, "This was awesome. She's such a brilliant lady." So Sultan BC on YouTube wrote, "I wish we could record voice comments for you." He moves on saying, "The way our Canadian society sees us is based on our behavior, especially us Iranians that are like a rainbow, so different from each other. I grew up on the streets of Vancouver in the late 80s. The first time I went to see my mom and dad in Iran, I was drafted in the army. You can only imagine my stories as a kid growing up in Canada, then serving in the Iranian army on the police force. Nowadays, I still travel to Iran often, and I see a lot of Iranians here in BC that try to be something they are not."
You know, we should do that voice comments.
I know, I like that
Figure that
idea.
out.
I
It's a
think
good idea.
through Instagram they can.
Voice
They can
comments?
send through Instagram,
Oh,
or they
that's
can
right.
even email it to us.
Or leave a Facebook message, right?
Yeah.
Voice comment that way.
Probably they can
And then we could play it. Anyway, good idea. Sultan,
Yeah, it's a great
Sultan
idea.
BC. Thank you.
Yeah, interesting thought. So the next person writes in a different tone. We have a Mojgan Qarizadeh on Facebook wrote, "So happy you are back, Jian. No doubt you're the most talented broadcaster in Canada." You know what? I tend to agree. I think so.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mujgan.
And wow, we have the letter of the week.
Letter of the week.
Woo! And can I just say, this letter touched me really, and I'm sure it'll touch Banafsha. This letter is basically the reason why I think Roqe exists. One of the most beautiful things is when, you know, just let me read it.
Okay.
Let me read it out to you. So we have a Hassan Amin on YouTube wrote, "My name is Hassan Amin. Jian, I wish one day I could tell you my family story. My story begins when Banafsha Akhlaqi came to rescue my brother and myself from deportation proceedings due to the special registration imposed. Banafsha briefly touched on it. I can tell you from a first-hand account as we went through it. Normal college-going student sent to jail with shackles for nothing. Banafsha is God-sent. I regard her as my mother. If it wasn't for her, I would have never had a life in North America. I owe everything to her, my family along with my life. She is the kindest human being we have ever met, and I can tell you this much. We were the first brothers whose case was turned around from deportation proceedings to green card. This brings back bittersweet memories, and now after hearing this interview, I know why Banafsha took us under her wings and helped us." That was really beautiful.
Wow.
Mind blown.
That's, you know,
Who would have thought?
Thank you, Hassan. Hassan Amin.
yeah, Hassan Amin.
That's really great that you
Yeah.
wrote in. And we got to pass that along to Banafsha.
Oh, you did?
No,
will?
we have to.
Of course.
That's the first
Yeah,
time
it's
seeing it.
beautiful.
She'll love this, I think. I mean, she'll obviously remember him, I would imagine. Thank you. Letter of the week, Hassan Amin.
Very deserving round of applause.
Bravo to Hassan Amin.
Some passive applause from 3 people, 4 people. Thank you, Keon, the fabulous Keon, for the letters of the week. Thank you, Captain Reza. Thank you, Groovy Shia. I want to go on some special music. Let me tell you what it is. A little bit of Chartar from their debut record in 2014, and a song called Ashubam. Thank you so much for listening to Roqe. Thank you so much for supporting. Thanks to our incredible little Roqe team. Reza, Shaya, Susan, Ponta, Mertad, Keon, Muhammad, the whole gang. Remember to keep in touch with us at info@roqemedia.com and subscribe. Mizun Bashin.
تنها تویی تو که میتپی به نبض این رهایی تو فارغ از وفور سایه هایی بازا که جز تو جهان من حقیقتی ندارد تو می روی که ابر غم ببارد به سمت ماندنت راهی نمی شوی چرا گاهی ستاره هدیه کن به مشت پوچ شبها شمرده تر بگو با من حروف رفتنت تا من بگیرم از دلت همه بهانه ها را شوبم آرامشم تویی به هر ترانی سر میکشم تویی سر اضافه کن
خزانه سراب این آن بریده من از آتش ترانه آفریده به سمت ماندنت راهی نمیشوی چرا گاهی ستاره هدیه کن به مشت پوچ شبها شمرده تر بگو با من حروف رفتنت تا من بگیرم از دلت همه بهانه ها را شوبم آرامشم تویی به هر ترانه‌ای سر میکشم تویی سر اضافه کن به فهم آسمانه آشوبم آرامشم تویی به هر ترانه‌ای سر میکشم تویی بیا که بی تو من غم 200 خزانه